Thank you, John. So for the past 20 years of my career, I've been involved for the better part of it in some way in efforts to try to make the built environment work a little bit better, socially, economically, for the natural environment, making it more inclusive. But my starting point for that career and also my end point of where I am now were two really unlikely places, at least in my mind. So I'm going to walk you through sort of the journey I've experienced to get to where I am, and talk a little bit about what I think we can do together in this coming year. So I was a bio major. I studied timber rattlesnakes, and for 2 years I conducted independent research on subpopulations in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, a beautiful natural wooded area in central and southern New Jersey. What was happening to these populations was, because of development and highway building, their habitat was getting bisected and the populations were getting fragmented. And this was leading to inbreeding, which causes all kinds of problems and can lead to the decline of a species. So in my research, I was looking at the question, are these subpopulations genetically less diverse than the larger populations that were not fragmented off? And I am sad to say that we found they were less diverse. So it was interesting foreshadowing that I didn't appreciate at the time for the turn my career would take a few years from this point. But sprawl was hurting our ecosystem. It was hurting the timber rattlesnake and probably lots of other species in New Jersey. So let's see if this works. So it's not working, so maybe you can help us, and I'll just keep talking through it. So we published this research actually very recently. My professors called me up and said, hey, we've got a whole bunch more information and data points on other populations, and we actually just published a paper last month in Herpetologica, which is a science journal. So far removed from what I'm doing now, but I was glad to have a scientific publication, a second scientific publication under my belt. So I finished up my degree. I went off and got my first job in Washington, D.C. at the George Washington University Photoimmunology Lab. I wore a white lab coat and did molecular biology research for 3 years on a very different topic than timber rattlesnakes. And it was great. I like science. I wanted to be a scientist. That was, the thing I was trying to maneuver toward. But as I was doing that work in the laboratory in the city, and I was doing a lot of volunteer work, and I ended up doing things like volunteering at Habitat for Humanity, except it was a partner of Habitat Humanity, and we were building affordable housing that so I did that for a while, and then I became I saw a job for community organizing, which I had never done professionally, but I was doing a lot of volunteer organizing at Green Home and other organizations. So I became a community organizer and started working projects like Earth Day. That Million Mile March slide would be good to put up right now, if you can. All right. It's not on here. How are you doing that? Okay, yeah. Oh, okay, great. So I started working projects like this. It was event planning. I was in charge of helping getting people to these events. And so it was kind of neat. We had zero budgets for these things. The Earth Day 2000 was the year 2000 celebration for Earth Day on the National Mall. We got 300,000 people to come and join us. And I was in charge of getting hand-printed invitation into the hands of 750,000 students all around the Metro DC area. Literally, we printed these up and stacked them with volunteers, and I delivered them. I rented a van and went and delivered them all around different school systems. And we got just tons of kids showing up to this thing. Million Mom March was a rally for gun control on Mother's Day in the year 2000 as well. We also did a cancer vigil to get folks out to Capitol Hill to increase funding for cancer research. So these projects were really great. This is where I learned how to do community organizing, how to take an idea and get a lot more people interested in what you're interested in, or at least find the folks who are also interested. How do you find them? How do you connect with them? How do you motivate them to join you? So from this, I got tired of doing event planning and wanted a regular job. So I applied for this job at the Sierra Club to be a community organizer for them. And my job was to go out to civic association meetings in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. and talk about things like zoning, get people interested in coming out to hearings for the constrained long-range plan, which I know everybody in this room actually knows what that is, to get folks involved in the community planning process. And one of the big campaigns we worked on was to try to get people to rethink a big investment decision we were making as a region. Should we spend billions of dollars to build a second beltway around Washington, D.C.? It was called the Techway, which is kind of a cool name. I mean, why not, right? Or, could we be doing other things? This is the Washington, D.C. metro system, subway system, and we would do things like print up pamphlets and draw in the purple line that we could build. So we were trying to visually talk about this in a visual way with people and try to get folks interested in questioning the sprawling investments we were making. While at Sierra Club, I eventually moved to the national campaign. I ended up becoming a lobbyist, trying to get more money for public transportation, and I was horrible at lobbying. You have to learn how to do that. You don't just show up and ask for, things because you think it's the right thing. But it was a very interesting experience. It really turned me off to the political process. I thought it was horrible. I thought I had no power in the process, and in that situation, I didn't. So I was kind of done with politics, and I focused my efforts on more on the organizing side. So I worked on putting out lots of reports showing what good projects can really result, the good results good projects can bring, and what some of the bad projects were doing to things like air quality and the economics of a city. I also ran around the country working with community organizations who wanted to do this kind of stuff locally, doing trainings. How do you talk about this stuff with people? Can I help you put presentations together? Or if you want to put meetings together, I can come in and help organize those, and let's get a critical minimum of people together and start talking about it. It was a good time. I learned a lot. It's also where I made the shift, and I made it pretty early in my career at Sierra Club, that I want to work on building great cities. If you're an environmentalist, work on cities, right? The mountains and rivers are critical, and we're all grateful that there are people who are focusing on that. But if we're going to save the world, we have to build excellent cities. We have to have lots of public transportation. We have to build walkable neighborhoods. And my job was to dole out this Kool-Aid, but I think I drank more of it than anyone I was doling it out to. So I was hooked. And so then I decided to go to grad school, did urban planning, came out of grad school. I was ready to go and work for the Urban Land Institute doing, I don't even remember what. When at the 11th hour, I saw something come across my email to interview for a job with a city council member in Washington, D.C. this guy, politician named Councilmember Tommy Wells. He had just been elected, so he was just coming into office and starting, I think he had been in office for 2 weeks, and he put this note out. He wanted a policy advisor for smart growth and sustainability. So I was intrigued. That looked interesting. So I asked for an interview and was lucky enough to get one. And I was expecting to talk to this guy for 20 minutes and then his chief of staff for half an hour. And then, you know, we'd figure things out from there. We ended up talking for about an hour and a half, the three of us together. And we were talking about the Transmilenio BRT project in Bogota. We were talking about view sheds for the waterfront development that was happening. He was spewing out numbers at me about how he's got 50% of all the development that's happening in the city in his ward. And it's making him nervous because what is that going to look like? And, you know, his job is to sort of steward that, and he needs help in making sure that we have human scale design. He was using the right words, and I was fascinated. He knew his stuff. He's also the guy who all the council members, they get a free parking spot right in front of City Hall on the street just for them. And he rode his bike to work, so he would ride his bike and park his bike in the parking spot. And there would be these big SUVs of the other council members on either side. And then he got into a huge fight with the City Hall facilities people because there was no decent bike parking. And so he kept parking his bike on the street. And he wouldn't lock it up or anything. He just put it in that parking spot and dare people to steal it, right, from in front of City Hall. So working with Tommy was a transformative professional experience for me. I was with his office for about a year and a half. We changed the building code to require bike parking regulations in all buildings that were 8 units or more. We got DC to participate for the first time ever in World Car Free Day, and it became a regional thing, and they've been doing it since. He said he's willing to take on parking. So my job was to bring him ideas every week of cool things he can do. And I'd mentioned market price parking. No one ever wants to do parking, right? It's like the political third rail. He said, I want to do parking. And he said this in the first year. And he said, I want to do it now because then maybe I'll have a couple of years for people to forget that I did it and they won't kick me out of office. So he was smart about that. But he took on parking, and we did a pilot project charging market value for the street parking at meters in front of these businesses on Capitol Hill, of all places. And I have to give him props. When we introduced this idea, of course, everybody was up in arms about it, right? But and so we had about 30 community meetings in 2 months. And I went to all of these, staffing him, and some of them were living rooms with about 20 people, but most of them were about 50, even 100 people, apartment buildings, and they would just yell at this guy, right? You're crazy, this is ridiculous, why should we have to pay for parking? We're paying our taxes, where am I supposed to put my car? And a lot of these people actually had paid parking opportunities in their building, they just wanted the free parking on the street. So that makes sense, right? We don't want to pay for things. And he just stood there and politely answered every question. And he said that I will always be the last person standing in the room. So if the meeting went, if there were people who had questions 3 hours into the meeting, he said, I'm not moving. I'm not moving from in front of that room until every person feels like they were heard. And he just exhausted them. He exhausted people. The project went through, it was successful. The city now has market price parking in a lot of other parts of the city. So after that, I did a bunch of other stuff, but I'm sorry? He was, you know, when he did the parking, people were printing up t-shirts that said one-term Tommy and passing them out. But when the election came, he was handily reelected. He did a lot of other great things, and people actually got to appreciate the parking, especially the businesses, after it was implemented, because they realized that a lot of those businesses, their workers were parking right in front of the restaurant and just you know, soaking up that parking space for like 8 hours. Whereas now there was less incentive to do that. And people who, you know, weren't going to move in 2 hours really had incentive to park somewhere else because it was more expensive. It wasn't free anymore. But he did get reelected. He also ran for mayor and lost, but the new mayor that came in hired him to be the sustainability director for the city. So now he's the sustainability director for Washington, D.C. He's a real interesting guy. He might come up and visit us sometime. So fast forwarding to the last few years of my life, we decided when I started working at Smart Growth America, let's see if we can get more of these politicians like Tommy Wells involved in building great neighborhoods and doing great urban design, doing better planning. So we started building a network, and my first 2 calls were to these guys. That's Mayor Mark Mallory, then Mayor Mark Mallory of Cincinnati, Ohio, and current mayor of Oklahoma City, Mick Cornett, Republican and Democrat. I knew them both because I had invited them to be on panels, so they kind of knew who I was, and said, we're starting a network. We need you guys to be involved. We want you to be the chairs of this thing. We don't know the rest of it, but help us build it. And they said yes. So I started cold calling a whole bunch of mayors, council members, county executives all around the country to see, are you interested in this? And we got a whole bunch of them saying yes. And these guys are pretty amazing. Before I run out of time, I do want to just take a minute to say something about some of these folks. So Madeline Rogero, mayor of Knoxville, Tennessee, she ran for mayor, lost, and the guy who won was so impressed with her, he made her the planning director, and then she became mayor the next time, and her predecessor is now governor, and she's a rock star. She's running around the country talking about how to do adaptive reuse and rebuild main streets. She's got the energy of a teenager, and she's someone's grandma. It's amazing. Ken Moore, Mayor of Franklin, Tennessee, he's a Republican. He's a retired doctor. He wants to do BRT from Franklin to Nashville. He's like, and he said, I have a bunch of mayors who want to do this, and they're Republicans, but we've got gridlock, and we're afraid we're not going to get the millennials and all that stuff. Mayor Engen, right above him, Missoula, Montana. What?
It has nothing to do with the program.
If you knew Mayor Engen, that is actually very appropriate music. Mayor Engen is hilarious. He did a zoning overhaul to fight some of the bad things that's happened because of Euclidean zoning and how zoning is stopping good development from happening, and people have ideas and developers have ideas. So he took a lot of those barriers out of the way, and he's got a huge affordable housing push. I can go on, and if we ever get to the point where we're having beers, I can tell you really great stories about these guys. All these guys said yes, they got involved with us. So we said, what should we do? Let's start putting toolkits together for politicians who come into office and they have 4 years to make a difference and they don't have a lot of time to do all the research. So we started putting toolkits together. These toolkits have everything from talking points, PowerPoint slides, legislative language, and even the 2-pager of, if you read these 2 pages in 5 minutes, you will have a working knowledge of this issue, and you'll be able to talk about it intelligently with other planners, with traffic engineers, whoever it is you're trying to convince. But these were hard to do. They take a long time. So then we thought, what else could we do that's more prolific? So then we started looking at city ordinances that were being passed all around the country on different topics. And we would call up the city and say, did it work? Prove to us that it was a great idea. Should other cities do this? And we got all the numbers and asked them how they passed it. And we put together profiles of these ordinances. And now anybody who's a part of this network can search this library. If they're interested in transfer of development rights, they can see how King County did it. It's one of the best, most successful ways that it's been done. So we try to find the places that got it to work right, and we showcase those. And every week, these guys get a newsletter basically giving them a profile of a different leader. We interviewed a different leader every week and asked them, what do you care about and why? And what's your vision? And how are you going to get it done? And we feature those profiles so that these leaders can start learning about each other. And then we feature one of these policy innovations. And then we also give them information about any funding that's out there to do this work. And speaking of funding, we also built a database of 100 grants that are out there, grants and free technical assistance. Apply for a free walking audit and bring your traffic engineer with you and see how you might be able to fix the intersections in your downtown, or get a affordable housing grant program or a brownfields grant. Then we started putting together events for these guys where we had a policy forum. And our policy on these forums was it's for the elected officials. So it was not a big conference. It was meant to be less than 100 people. And 80% would be, is that for me? Okay. 80% would be politicians, and 20% could be staff and people like us. And they presented their ideas to each other and asked them in a closed room, how did you get that done? Like, how did the developers not kill you when you introduced that idea? And these were successful. We had 2 of them, and we had about 70 or 75 politicians come to each one. Today, the organization is 300 people strong, and it's growing. And that's pretty much when I left to come here. And, you know, one of the questions that is in my mind is, wow, that was a fun project to work on. We've got all these politicians involved and engaged, and they're starting to pass these bills, copying each other's good ideas. But it's a great boutique program. One of the things I'm really interested in thinking about, and I invite anyone who's interested in this to really work with me as a sounding board or just to give ideas, is what if we scaled this up? There are 200,000 elected officials in local government in this country. That doesn't even include the school districts or special districts. We had 300 people in this. What if we scaled this up where you have 3,000 or 30,000 motivated politicians who get good urban design and want to work with us? So I'm interested in that question. And we can do all things like talk about apps. We could organize brown bags where we have students and local, or maybe not even so local, elected officials come in and talk about some of these issues. And I'm very interested in the visual organization of the kind of information that we all deal with. So I'll stop there so that I know I'm over time. So I'll look forward to your questions and talking more throughout the year.